So good afternoon. I am Anto Gudiarjo. This is Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday at 3 p.m. ET to figure out the future of smart buildings. The list of panelists is on mondaylive.org. A reminder that the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Please do use the Zoom Q&A and chat tools over the course of this show and complete the survey at the end. Also a reminder that this slide deck is on mondaylive.org on the homepage in case you want any of the links that we share on this. So this month, this is a brand new month today. Our topic for the month is new market dynamics. This is really after a few months talking about very specific subjects and realizing that there's something going on here that we need to try and sort of figure out what it implies in terms of our business, specifically on a sort of business front, not on a technology front. So that should be an interesting month. This is our agenda for today. On that new market dynamics, we're going to talk about really what people are asking for, what building owners are asking for of our industry. And before we do that, I'm going to share just quickly a few slides. This is, Ken Sinclair talking about what's on his May issue. We'll get him to opine on this in a minute. John Petsy talking about climate change and Haystack Connect. Keen to hear what the anticipation is for that this week. Anna talking about acquisitions in the smart building space from a report from Memory. Mark talking about Apple's new engineering hub in North Carolina and JP Morgan. Gina talking about cities helping cities. So this is the Smart Cities Council. If you recall, we had Phil Bain, its lead, here a few weeks back. So it'll be interesting to hear what Gina has to say. I was sort of shocked to see this this morning. This is still on COVID, obviously. Two sort of major challenges that we're facing in the US is really all about getting the economy going again. Meanwhile, in India, things are really pretty disastrous and pretty bad. So obviously our hearts and thoughts go out to what's going on in India. So before we plow into the chit chat, we've decided to give you all homework. And so this is the homework for this month. There's been several discussions over the past weeks about building ratings. So what we thought we'd do is to create a way of actually collating all of the thoughts and all of the different building rating programs that are out there. We put up a Google spreadsheet and it's on this link that you see here, homework.mondaylive.org. You can go there and basically the idea is please fill in this sheet. Add new ones to the sheet if you don't see one that's already there, and at the end of the month we'll take a look at this and see what it provides us. So please help us with that. And with that, back to the group, and let's start with Ken. Tell us about what's going on in May.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Our May issue is just online. On Saturday, went online, actually Friday. The theme is building digital family and the wireless wave. And we've been talking about the twins. They're kind of the special kids in the family, but they're certainly not the only kids in the family. So we tried to expand that a little bit. And that's what our topic is about. We've got some great articles. I've been extremely busy with the ControlCon folks, one of their keynotes and a media sponsor. That event is coming together well. It's also coming on a virtual a new virtual platform never seen before. We were just talking about that before the show. I'm thinking that these new mediums are in fact part of the education that's coming into our space in the next little while. One of the topics that came out of that conference that I was interested in was Sabine Lamb, and she wrote an article for our May issue, and it's called Digitalization is Changing the MSI Focus. And of course, it's an interesting concept because we've identified a new class of people, I guess, the enablers of integration. And these are the folks that actually acknowledge that master systems integrators are required and they need to be organized, and you may in fact have more than one. And it's also another trend that is built into that is that the master systems integrator is becoming an in-house task or an in-house management thing, and we need folks that can actually enable integration. So that's an interesting concept. Also part of ControlCon is a talk from a lady called Bobby from University of Kentucky, and she's an in-house integrator. So that's kind of an interesting trend as well. Basically, we also did a control talk yesterday with Eric, and we chatted a little bit. Ken was unable to join us, so we chatted a whole bunch about the family and the family relationship, and how really it is just like building family, and we have all the misfits and we have all the dysfunctionality that happens in the family, happens in our buildings, but in the final analysis, you have to all sit at the dinner table and kind of pull this all together. And the wireless wave, it just becomes the newest kid on the block. Then we have to decide how we're going to deal with it and how we're going to bring it into the family. I think
Great.
that's a summation.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Ken. John.
Yeah, so you know, the first article this time will be different. You know, how automation systems can contribute to helping reduce the impact of climate change stuff. I just thought that was interesting, and maybe true, because there's a belief that people are seriously looking at the building stock about what they have to do, but having been around for a while, I think I heard that one before. And so it also grabbed my attention for that reason. But anyways, I think it's good conversation. It's good articles. It's good to see that, because there is, as Ken's been saying, a whole new field of people we need to educate about the role that automation systems, which as we know are hidden behind the walls and ceilings of buildings and nobody knows what they're doing, how critical they are. One of the things I think we've talked about before is, the data is more important than, or is worth more than the equipment now. And when people react, you say, well, what if you run that equipment wrong? You'll spend more money than what the equipment cost you, right? And that's the role of the control system, right? So anyways, that's why I thought that was important to note. And I have to shameless plug for a non-commercial organization, which is Project Haystack, and the Haystack Connect conference starts tomorrow, 3 days. We've got over 750 people worldwide registered for the event, highest attendance we've ever had. New members that have joined the organization, papers and presentations from a wide range of people around the world. So we're looking for a very successful, fully online virtual event. So,
Thanks, great. Anno, talk about acquisitions in the building space.
Yeah, interesting, right? It's first quarter 2021 Memorial Report. It's one of those reports that they do that you don't have to purchase. It's pretty good. 58 acquisitions just in the Q1 period. A lot of movement and M&A work going on. Several of these are now going through this SPAC process. If you haven't kept tabs of that, the special purpose acquisition companies is the latest rave of how you do acquisitions and stuff. So some interesting case studies there. Obviously, the WeWorks one is one of the ones that jumped out. Is now owned by BowX Acquisition Corp, which was the SPAC that acquired it. So a lot of movement still in the IoT smart building space, and probably will continue to do so for 2021.
Hey, can I jump in and add something? I don't know how many people saw Alberio bought their first international company over in the UK. So that's
Yeah.
to me, that seems like a new trend. I've seen roll-ups of, system integrators in the US, but I can't remember when they've actually tried to go international myself. There may have been some examples, but I don't remember it.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
Hey,
Mark.
let me jump into real quick. I want to go back one to John. So, John, how would you suggest somebody consumes the virtual event? Just out of curiosity, what are some of the best practices you think just to be involved in that?
Yeah, so we've taken we haven't gone for a really wild platform. We've gone for a platform that allows live chat against the presentation. But what we did is you can attend it live, and as long as you've registered, every single minute of it is recorded for you to watch later. So you get both. And we had to do that because we've got a worldwide audience, but also, people get busy, they get interrupted, whatever. And we actually think that has something to do with, the attendance level, in that you're giving people the freedom to absorb, take the content when they can. But that's what we did with our approach. We offered for speakers to do both live or recorded. Very few opted to pre-record their presentation. Some did, typically international, but most people want to be live, which is a good indication. So,
Thank you.
Good. Good.
Actually, I wouldn't mind adding a comment to that too, because in the ControlCon one, it was interesting. They originally built it as a hybrid, and the idea was they would have like 100 or 200 people on site. The COVID rules came up, and the COVID rule is there's no more than 25 people in a room. So they quickly had to shift to a virtual. As they shifted to a virtual, the thing evolved into a global event as well. So I think that is another trend that happens with these things. The other one, Jim Young is our one of our keynotes, and so we've had a meeting with him, and he's chatting about the next RealCom in Phoenix, and it may be one of the first outdoor events, which is kind of an interesting twist. But the other I think message is that if you're actually planning an event, you cannot move forward based on it actually being a real event, because the rules are changing so fast. You've got state rules, you've got city rules, you've got facility rules, and all of a sudden one of them will trap you. So you have to proceed on a pretty much a full virtual event. And then if you're real lucky, you may be able to roll out a hybrid. And if you're really, really lucky, you might be able to turn it into a real event. I think that's my shot from the hip.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, two things this week for me that I think finally starting to see some trends. One is the one about Apple deciding to build a huge campus in Research Triangle Park to employ 3,000 people. And what's interesting, the trend for me is we're finally starting to see Silicon Valley foundational companies start to look at elsewhere. As we've seen Tesla moving, opening up a plant in Texas, so forth and so on. So I believe that Oracle, and so that to me is, are we seeing a trend? I believe we are. Second is the fact that JP Morgan by May 17th, which is what, 2 weeks from now, give or take, is going to have trying to get at the beginning of 50% of their workforce to return back to their office. So, and again, they're going that it'll be, never will be 100%, but will be on everything that we've talked about over the last year of what will be the new norm. And here we are, beginning to see that come to fruition.
So, Mark, what I'm thinking about there? This is interesting. So COVID just almost brought out the obvious in some sense, meaning everybody just had offices. Now you'll bring some distinction and nuance to who actually has offices. So think about JP Morgan or somebody like that, where maybe you need an environment like Boiler Room. Remember the movie? Okay, we need to bring everybody together. And maybe there's other types of organizations where, I don't know, it's just all intellectual work or whatever, maybe not so much creative. Well, we just don't need that. So it's going to bring some nuance to who gets buildings and who doesn't. I don't know, just an idea.
Gina.
Let's see. Yep, there. I got it. Thank you. So, Anto, I just you tasked us with trying to find something you thought was kind of a trend. Maybe not so much of a trend, but I just remember a few years ago, when we were talking about smart cities, it was everything. Everybody had a smart city. Every company had a smart cities team, and they were all doing this, doing that, and it just seemed like it got really quiet. For a while, but over the last few months, I've kind of seen a little bit of a reemergence of that. And I expect to, after COVID, see a lot more of that, where cities and towns are now going to be taking a much more active part in, I would probably say, number one, protecting, being a little bit more protective of their towns and cities. So this was interesting to me. Smart Cities Councils, everybody's familiar with. They have initiatives, cities helping cities. And so, cities can, because it's a huge undertaking. So if they can have a sister city that they help stand up and things from best practices or what have you. And the recent one, they've deployed a couple of different programs throughout this global organization, as you know, and they've deployed a couple of different programs. This one was interesting. It was out of Orange County, Florida, who has some significant initiatives for the next few years. And they're taking advantage of a lot of the programs with the Smart Cities Council as far as using a sister city to help them kind of navigate. So I just thought it was worth bringing up. Anyone that's interested in the Orange County, Florida, I'd encourage you to kind of go there and Google that. They've had a couple of webinars to talk about what their initiatives are and what they're going to be doing. And I thought it was very good information. So that's all I got.
Yeah, that's great. You may recall that we had Phil Bain on the show.
Yeah.
I think it was in March. He was talking about this. And I think one of the issues about it is it's really good. I think it's doing good stuff, but it's not very exciting. It's not as exciting as, sort of technology stuff, but it's what's needed. That's really what he was saying.
Yeah, and that's what I thought was kind of, I thought that was kind of interesting because, you see that Orange County, Florida taking advantage of that and actually deploying that. And there are other cities like I think Australia, New Zealand, different cities utilizing the programs that they're coming on. I think they launched the programs around the time that Phil came on. But just to bring more attention to that, and a lot of the cities are very open with letting you know what their plans are. And so I think anyone that's interested in that should probably follow that and, see what these cities need. So that's all.
Great.
Thank you.
What you're saying, Gina, I threw it in the chat, is a Gartner press release that I read today from October. Kind of underscoring what you're saying. What caught my eye is the different geographical applications of what IoT is going to be important for. For California cities, I am just, I think it's distressing how little rain we got over the winter seasons. And so now the headlines are about how long the fire season's going to be. And we know what last year was like.
Yeah.
And so it's the IoT, even Gartner's picking up, in the West Coast, probably in Australia, New Zealand too. It's going to be the IoT for fire related things, smoke, air quality. And then in other regions, it's all the video cameras and what we went through this summer in various cities that more camera stuff that cities are concerned with. So I just thought the way Gartner had it organized was kind of interesting in and of itself.
This is good information. Yeah, thank you.
Just the press release. Okay. Who knows who buys the full reports from Gartner anymore? That's not a name that that comes up a lot.
Okay, so let's move on to our main topic of the day under the heading of new market dynamics. The question is, what are building owners asking for? And I'm going to bring in our guest, Rory Barnwell from the DLR group. He should be joining us any moment. There you go. And Rory, really great to have you here as part of the as part of Monday Live. You're still muted.
Sorry,
yeah, there you go.
Just coming on board there now.
Okay.
Thanks. You guys hear me okay?
Really great to have. Everything looks good. So really great to have you here. Maybe if you can do a brief introduction and give us a sort of a taste of what you're hearing from building owners, and then that can sort of initiate a conversation around this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Anto, and thanks everyone for having me. So again, my name is Rory Barnwell. I'm a principal at DLR Group. Just for context and reference, DLR Group, we're a large design firm, but I'm here in Chicago at the moment. But we've got 29 locations, 1,200 people scattered around, mostly North America. We have an office in Shanghai and Dubai also. So yeah, I guess I was trying to think of what to talk about today. New market dynamics, because so much has changed obviously over the last year or whatever, and at the same time, not much has changed. You know, when you peel behind the headlines and the buzzwords and everything else. So I guess I was hoping to kind of run through. We take a fairly pragmatic approach to all of this and don't put too much stock into buzzwords. So I was going to kind of run through what we're seeing from, again, being a large design firm that practices in many different sector areas and building types. I'll be the range of the conversation will kind of be on one end of the scale, the high end tech clients, Class A commercial office buildings, to school districts in downstate Illinois. Again, same systems, same problems, just different context of the conversation. So and then again, obviously revolving around what hurts from smart and healthy buildings. I guess if that's the biggest change over the last year is the amplification of the healthy aspect, whereas it's not a new concept, obviously. Healthy, productive. I guess maybe prior to the pandemic, it was in the kind of the realm of what can we do to make people more productive. What systems, what apps can we put in place to the whole 330, 300 rule. If we can hit that 300, I think that's everyone gets that at this point. So that's definitely kind of has a major spotlight shine on it now, and maybe some of these factors that were a little fuzzier beforehand to quantify are now we're really need to get down to figuring that out. And I'd say probably the biggest change was here in my office today. Obviously, I live out in the West Burbs here in Chicago, and just walking down the street, and there's just been a lot of new construction in Chicago, and I passed 150 North Riverside here. That's brand new, state-of-the-art, 1.5 million square foot shining glass tower. And on the leasing information on the front of this, Class A office building is MERV 15 filters and 8 air changes per hour. I'm like, all right, so that's pretty cool. Cool, funny, whatever. When the leasing team are throwing out, these types of metrics where it used to be, rooftop party deck or whatever the other amenity was in the amenity wars. So it's kind of cool that we've taken that kind of back of house conversation, quite literally very, very much front of house, and the top 2 or 3 bullet points of that leasing folks are gravitating around. And then so you got regular folks talking about our world. It's gone mainstream, and taking that back of house conversation front of house means there's more people have more access to data than we even had before, and don't necessarily understand it. And I'd say, going down through that list, probably at the start of the pandemic, everyone was focused about air quality and deep cleaning. I think we've maybe moved away from the deep cleaning conversation a little bit. We're not washing our groceries or thinking about it anymore. So we kind of move past that a little bit as a society, but I think the air quality is still very much front and center, and maybe even taking on a bit more focus. So I'll go through a couple of those metrics. So I'd say in general, the new data sets I'm talking about, that again, new quote unquote, air quality, thermal comfort, occupancy, and actually, funny enough, acoustics is hot too. I'll kind of touch on that and why. Air quality, again, the quality of the air we breathe generally has been measured by, CO2 is kind of, our mainstream metric for that. We're humans. CO2 is a natural human bioeffluent. We breathe it out. So, turns out it's a good proxy for how well or how poorly ventilated a space is or how occupied a space is. And so now, the correlation is high CO2 levels equals too many people or need more air. So that was, maybe pre-pandemic, obviously focused on, demand control. And we use CO2 readings to throttle down the amount of air that was coming into the building to save energy. That was the driving factor for measuring that metric. I'd say the two of the three key performance indicators for air quality, CO2 being one, the other being TVOC and particulate matter. TVOCs, again, prior to the pandemic, where anyone that's been through a LEED project, knows we had to do a pre-occupancy flush to get that that new car smell, that new building smell. And that's really the off-gassing of carpets, paints, glues, adhesives, etc. So the materials that we selected to go into the building played a major factor in the off-gassing and the chemicals of that was going into the airstream. Post-pandemic or during the pandemic or wherever we want to figure we are, that again, that deep cleaning, the chemicals that are being used, green cleaning policies are kind of been gone out the window for a while here. So that's something people are definitely interested in tracking too. And then particulate matter, again, prior to the pandemic, that was, probably the mainstream metric in places like China where the outdoor air quality was so bad and smog and everything else. On the West Coast, obviously a lot of tragedy with the forest fires there. And that was, again, some of the big tech companies that we're working for, that was they were getting impacted by that long before the current pandemic. And so whether it was from a case of understanding when to invest in better filters or whether it was, hey, we want to tell our employees that it's okay to come here. We've invested in the system and, we've set this building up as a place of refuge, so that and comparing outdoor air quality to indoor air quality in that regard. So that's air quality. Then obviously thermal comfort's not a new concept. I think maybe as I'll get into now that we're kind of pushing, you push something and something else pokes out. So I think now when we're being asked by ASHRAE to do pre-occupancy, post-occupancy purges and, work those into sequence of operations or, X amount of air change rates to et cetera, that impacts, obviously, are you comfortable in the space? So I guess now just there's more access to that data too, and people have that in the palm of their hands, whereas, they wouldn't have had before. Some, other kind of key metrics that people are gravitating around as well would be, occupancy, people counting. Again, it's a data set. And I kind of say all this in the context, we need to provide context around all of these, when we're trying to evaluate, how well is the building performing. I think the bottom line here is that clearly prior to this, a pretty good barometer for how well or how poorly a building performing was, well, what's the Energy Star rating? How much energy is it using? It's not using very much energy. It must be a good building. And so clearly that's a little bit of a flawed, very single-minded approach. In terms of occupancy prior to the pandemic, a lot of, again, big tech clients and just any kind of rapidly expanding organization were concerned about that from a densification perspective. How much more people can we put into this square footage? How can we reformat this space to make better use of the shared amenities, the conference rooms? We've got 3 different types of conference rooms in our standard office plate, but everyone likes the big one and the small one, but no one likes the mid-sized ones. Maybe we should just have more small or more phone closets, that kind of thing. So better understanding how a space is being utilized and, whether that's just basic counting of people, how many people are in the space today versus, footfall and dwell time and heat maps of how, how spaces are being used. Again, post-pandemic, very obviously it's kind of flipped on its head. We're not worried about densification anymore. It's, you know, safety, and, you know, again, how our space is being used. I can tell you anecdotally that there's still single digits occupancy in most of the buildings downtown here. I'm in a 1 million square foot building right now, and our space here is built out for 75 people. There's maybe, you know, 4 or 5 people here today. So that's, I'd say, true for most big cities at the moment. And then the last one that I think, you know, again, something that we've always tracked. It's always been important. Acoustics, probably not no direct relation to the pandemic, but I think to get people back into offices and to, you know, I think operational excellence is going to be defined by its impact, the impact on occupant experience. And so another kind of lingering kind of flaw in our workplace, you know, for the last few years has been the concept of an open office environment. And now, you know, we've all had our, again, hyper personalized spaces at home, and we've got things set up just the way we like them at home. Now, when you get back something that mightn't have annoyed you so bad beforehand, and now you're in an open office space and there's 6 Zoom meetings going on at the same time, and you're hearing bleed over of all these different things, you know, that's not good. People get very annoyed very quick. The tolerance level for getting annoyed is a lot, the bar is a lot lower now, you know, whereas maybe before you would have tolerated some of that. And so just the inherent challenges with an open office work environment is being challenged. But, you know, again, you know, some of our clients like to, you know, send out push note, you know, you come into the office, I have some heads down work to do. So based on my preference for the day and, you know, hot desking system, the system's going to put me somewhere where there's less noise, or, you know, I can go and get some heads down work, or maybe the opposite. I'm, you know, walking into the Dublin office and I want to, you know, it's my first day over there and I want to go and connect to people. It's going to send me to a desk where there's some chatter or some social activity going on. So, and then maybe with the exception of acoustics, which is kind of a unique one that I just said, everything else relative to energy, you know, where does this leave energy conservation? I think I read recently that, you know, we're still, again, I might be one of 5 in our space today, and we might be, you know, collectively the 8 or 9% that's in this total building today. But the chief engineers downstairs, we've got lease agreements, and, you know, they have to provide the same environment, whether it's 8% or 80% occupied. So there's a lot of energy being used. You know, how we're basically, we have an industry, a controls industry that's kind of built around temperature controls and energy efficiency. Where does air quality fit into that? Whereas, you know, we don't really have, we do, there's coming on the market now. And I think that's a little bit of the Wild West in terms of what sensors can we use, what sensors can we install to, you know, tell a chief engineer that, hey, in addition to your regular morning warm-up cycle, you need to also do a morning air cleanse, you know. So it's no, you know, it's not good enough for you to get the building up to temperature by 7 a.m. And, you know, now you're going to need to, because in theory you can do that without opening an outdoor air damper. You know, we're not focused on the quality of the air, we're focused on the temperature of the air. But now, how do you do that? Well, you know, probably pretty much the only air quality sensor that we have in any of our systems right now would be that CO2 sensor. But, you know, again, when was that installed? When was that last calibrated? Does it even have a calibration procedure? Probably, you know, more likely, no. It's got a 8-10 year lifespan, and you just got to get a new one after that. So, and as I said, it was installed with the purpose of throttling that outdoor air damper down. And I mean, more likely at that morning air cleanse, you know, pre-occupancy purge, there's not going to be CO2 in the airstream to worry about. It's more likely the VOCs, because the systems have been shut down since 7 p.m. the night before. You know, you tend to see TVOC levels drift up, because that's when the off-gassing occurs, and that's when the cleaning crew comes through. And so that's what you'd need to kind of to purge out of the system. So I think we're going to, you know, the other shoe to fall here out of all of this is the concept of energy conservation, the concept of energy efficiency, energy effectiveness versus energy conservation. You know, how effective was that? You know, whether you're talking on a macro level for the whole building, or you're talking about an office, you know. So I'm in the west side of the office, you know, so our you know, because a lot of our clients have these, you know, carbon reduction goals and, you know, ESG goals and everything else, and wants to get down to the level of granularity of, well, well, let's pit the accounting department against the engineering department. Okay, well, hey, the accounting department saved 30% energy last month. Okay, but were they miserable? You know, or if my, you know, even, and then, you know, kind of taking the conversation, because I feel like conversation maybe too much revolves around Class A commercial office buildings, but, you know, even taking school districts, or, you know, if the school district where my 3 daughters go to school sent a letter home and said, hey, great news, we saved 40% energy last year. My initial reaction, or most people's initial reaction, okay, that must be good, right? But not really. I need a little more context. I mean, where, you know, did you still maintain, you know, a productive and healthy learning environment? You know, now we've gotten people like Dr. Joe Allen and, you know, the Harvard Department of Public Health, who are, you know, they've started to put metrics to, well, you know, at X level of CO2, that starts to impact the, you know, the cognitive learning ability of a child's brain, or starts to impact productivity in a workplace. And so I think energy effectiveness, you know, how we use that energy to support the environment is something that we need to wrap our arms around as an industry here pretty quickly. Because again, it's pretty easy to get to net zero, carbon neutral, if you just turn off all the lights and turn off all the HVAC. We live in a box, and that's not a very pleasant place to be. So I think people-centric control strategies, designing for human experience, and defining operational excellence by that occupant experience is probably the key moving forward. I got a couple other points to touch on there, maybe on certifications, but Anton, do you want me to stop for questions, or just keep going for a bit?
Yeah, let's just stop and get some reaction from the group, assuming there are some. I'm sure there are.
I'd like to, I'll start with Rory or anybody. When you're selling a product, talking to a customer and so forth, that last point you just made, it's certainly easy to talk about what's going on, how can we fix stuff and air quality and all that. But is the customer experience a key part of the algorithm these days when you're interacting with the client? Or is it an afterthought?
I think it's very much, you know, again, if you just want to go back to the high-rise multi-tenant office, you know, and even just air quality, you know, what the landlord wants to do and portray is very different than what the tenant wants to do and portray. And, you know, I think the landlord's primary objective to even having this conversation is, hey, stop talking about 8% occupied buildings. I want 80% plus, you know. And so what can we do? What can the landlord do to communicate or provide, you know, trust and transparency in the data that either, you know, they are a Class A building and they've invested in, you know, the best HVAC systems and control systems, and, you know, they want to just tell that story, whether it's via a tenant app or you know, a display in the lobby. So that's, I think, very much customer focused, because they want to see green is good, air quality is great, come on in. I think from even in the tenant perspective, then, you know, now, because, you know, you have to remember, really, we're talking about different types of air quality sensing, right? Because so what a landlord's going to do is put air quality sensors in the base building systems, because that's all they can do. That's what they control. They don't really control what goes on within the tenant space. So as a landlord, really what you're promising to your customer is, you know, from the moment that CFM of air comes through the outdoor air intake, you know, through our great filters and coils and, you know, UVGI or whatever other enhanced system that we've invested in, to the time it gets to the demising wall in the tenant space, we're promising to you that we're giving you the absolute best, highest quality, high performing air. Once it goes past that into the tenant space, it's kind of up, now it's out of the landlord's control. They don't really control what, you know, material the tenant uses, or if they stuff 10 people into a conference room, or someone has a really horrible smelling lunch in the microwave that, you know, sets off VOCs, or, you know, so there's I guess that's, you know, who interprets the data and how they interpret data is very important as well. And then, I mean, who knows? There's lots of people don't know the difference in CO2 and CO, and, you know, one's going to make you drowsy and fall asleep, and one kill you, you know. So it's
got it.
Yeah. Hey, Rory, like something that we brought up today and in past is the rise of the WeWork model. And I'm kind of throwing in expecting Airbnb to jump into this space as well, of being hoteling of commercial space, as well as Airbnb being your vacation properties. I see them as a very powerful additional level, you know, especially you think looking out where you are on Wacker Drive and all the buildings that are only partially occupied right now, bringing those people back in, it would be for an experience. And kind of, we really, I think, collectively and as a culture thought WeWork went over the top, but I think the new WeWork seems to be well positioned right now. And a lot of those ideas, and I attribute some of them to Lindsay Baker and Comfy, but you know, the apps that allow people to speak to each other and say, hey, you know, we're going to keep the temperature in this corner of the office this, and maybe over here we're going to do that. And WeWork, of course, picked up on those kind of apps. I sort of see the rise of that. Would you say similar?
I would 100%. Yeah, full disclosure, I just watched that WeWork documentary on Hulu recently, so that's maybe warped my answer a little bit, but
they went too far. But
yeah. No, in all seriousness, though, I think I mean, just the concept of again, I mean, it's all down to occupant experience. I'm too hot, I'm too cold, you know, I'm kind of, I guess all of that right now is hyper focused. You know, if I've made the effort to come downtown and I'm not exactly super comfortable, I'm, you know, my threshold for getting annoyed, as I said, is a lot lower. But I think that would go for technology for most things, you know. So, but yeah, they're ahead of it, and you know, I think they should be well positioned to benefit from as we bounce back here to returning to the office. It's a good model.
So Rory, this is Mark. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, Mark.
So you made a couple comments about data, of course, and sensors, of course, air quality, occupancy, so forth and so on. One of the things that I continually see is, yes, those are all important. And folks are putting in these sensors to gauge and to get that information, but they are not being integrated into the overall building operating platform. So here we are, instead of all this integration, interoperability that I think everybody on this call probably supports, do you see we're kind of going backwards, where this data just sits out there by itself, and you know, somebody might look at it, but how is that being affected, used within the bigger scheme of things of a true integrated system within the built environment?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point there, and I'd say that's probably one of the biggest criticisms that that you might receive for you know, gathering data and using analytics to get more meaningful insights to how a building is being, you know, how a space is being utilized, how a building has been occupied and being used. Using that data to inform design decisions, to inform real estate decisions, you know, right now, you know, creating that foundational layer of data, which you need to do anyways, is quite an effort. And, you know, I think when you say, oh, but you're not using it to automate anything, well, yeah, we are. That's, you know, that's the next step. I think for most, I think it's just taking the walk before you run kind of approach to it. But I'd also say that these sensors are very much the bleeding edge of the industry right now. And I would love nothing more than for some of the bigger, you know, controls guys to step in and buy some of these, because right now it's very painful to get these sensors. It's very painful to find a sensor that is, you know, we revolve around reset. You know, as in our opinion, reset is the predominantly in terms of indoor air quality. You know, if you're putting in an air quality sensor, it should be certified by reset. Now that's fair enough to say, but then when you go to reset's website, or you know, when you go to use that as a standard, if that's the predominant air quality standard globally, and there's really only a couple of sensors there, and they're still back ordered from the Chinese New Year, and you know, then they came and they weren't quite right, and you had to send them back again. You know, still, that's kind of what you're up against. And you know, we're working with, you know, the most recognizable names in the industry here, and everyone's up against the same thing. And again, from one extreme to the other, some schools are putting in a couple of sensors. Some tech clients are doing absolute full coverage on every metric I just said across their entire enterprise, and they're still all dealing with the same thing. So I would, someone needs to go buy these smaller companies and make it more mainstream, and then 100%, let's automate that. But right now, there's really not. That morning air cleanse right now, you can't automate it, or there's no. We just haven't been tracking particulate matter or VOC levels as mainstream metrics, right? CO2 we have, but.
Hey Rory, this is Arno.
Hey Arno,
how you doing?
Good.
On the when you're talking about the occupancy and the CO2 and everything else, are you seeing anything interesting in the video aspects of that? Are people doing video analytics versus CO2 sensors and that sort of thing?
I would say there's interesting trends within the occupancy sensor kind of market, where you've seen probably the predominant players there would be like, people like a Density or a Verge Sense or someone like that, and they've, I think Density, I think they got like 50 million of venture capital backed up, here in the last 12 months. But, their technology, they're coming out, every one of the types of tech firms, et cetera, progressive, sophisticated firms that are deploying these types of sensors are super concerned about personally identifiable information. And so, when Density comes out with a radar-based technology to, really just show blobs, and you can see blobs moving, but you can't tell if it's a girl or a boy, or A versus B. That's what people want, So it's just, there's that fine line between being able to tell it's Jim and Mary, So
Rory, this is Steve Fay.
Hey, Steve.
I know we haven't met before, but I was picking up on your comment about that the building owner produces high quality air at the point where it enters the tenant space, and I agree with that. But ultimately, the tenant needs to know what it's actually doing in their space, and so. And building I was in before in downtown Richmond, we had, as a tenant, we had no control over the VAV operation other than to ask for different set points. And ultimately, whatever that air quality is it is what it is. But I would say, I think it would make sense in most buildings, and I thought Mike Hobb commented on this, is I would think it would be the landlord's obligation to add more sensing so that the tenant knows what the conditions are in their space. So at least they're aware, and maybe then it would involve some kind of efforts to understand why it's too high or too low or whatever the condition might be. But giving them the central information coming out of the air handler is almost useless information.
It is, yeah. I mean, in terms of, again, getting into the certifications, then, if you were going to put the plaque on the wall for, reset, you have a core and shell approach and a commercial interiors approach. But just to your point, what you said, shouldn't the landlord give tenants or put sensors in their place? I'd say, 100% in an ideal world. But I think the reality is that there's a level of troubleshooting and education that needs to go on. If the tenants walk in the door and see, red air quality is not good right now, or even if it's anything that's not green. I mean, people expect it green all the time.
Yeah.
And so there is some troubleshooting, and it is easy enough to have like things like hand sanitizer or cologne, or, that person that was doing the smelly lunch in the microwave. These are things that and again, when you think about it, I mean, if you don't like fish and you can smell fish in your office, it's going to make you, that's going to make you unpleasant. And,
right.
You're not going to have the best experience if you've been thinking about the fish in the microwave. so
I did have a quick follow-up. So the fact that health is becoming more of an issue, is that changing the way the solution is being provided in the market from a channel perspective? Are you choosing different types of contractors to implement some of these health things, or are you requiring them to have greater skills? How's it impacting it from a channel delivery perspective?
I mean, I'd say when
if
you
at
have
all?
a clean slate and it's a new construction, you know, and again, I know you guys have talked about digital twins for the last month. So not to go down that rabbit hole again, but, you know, I think now, you know, user stories, use cases are very much more revolved around the health of the building, the health of the occupants, the occupant experience. If we can save energy doing that, I mean, that's a win-win. And, you know, clearly we got these mandates that we need to adhere to anyways, but I'd say very much so, you know, the MSI that's going to be picked to integrate that project will be picked based on, you know, how much experience you have in the past, or how front and center you're putting these objectives, you know. So I think the traditional role is kind of, you know, I wouldn't say flip, but, you know, that very just a different focus, you know.
Sorry, Jim Lee here. I'm sorry.
Oh, that would be my second one.
Don't go ahead. Go ahead. It's fine.
No, you first, Jim. That's
okay. Thanks. In light of 15% occupancy, where is the funding coming to pay for all of these changes?
Yeah, that's another great question. You know, I think right now, I mean, you got the property management team who are tasked with managing the property, and you got the building ownership team who could be, you know, some real estate investment trust or someone in China or Europe or, you know, whatever, not necessarily in the building every day. Right now, they're finding the money from somewhere because, I mean, they got to do something, and, you know, they're just funding it. I don't know exactly how, but, you know,
it's being funded though.
It's being funded, but yeah, but not. That's hard to explain. It was like, yes, it's been funded, but out of a necessity rather than, you know, it's like, well, geez, we got to do something to get people back in this building. That kind of an attitude, you know.
Oh, that's interesting unto itself.
Right. Yeah.
Rory, I was just being your PR person again to say that, like, DLR Group, one of the cool things is that you've done a lot, you know, you've done a certain amount of work in China. You've seen this air quality issue because of China's, you know, general industrialization and smoke quota. People have way pre-pandemic have been real sensitive to air quality. So some of the solutions that you've seen work over there, you're bringing over here.
Yeah, I would say over there, and even, you know, again, from just our own K-12 practice, you know, we've been, you know, one of the things we've been doing for many years is you know, we do facility master plans, you know, to prepare for a bond referendum for a school district to go out to ask for a large chunk of money from the taxpayers of the community to invest in the school district. And so if you've got, you know, $250 million in deferred maintenance and another 250 in creating 21st century learning environments, and you're trying to answer questions, will we throw good money after bad with this existing middle school, or should we, you know, consolidate these and build new? Again, that forced us many years ago to think, you know, how are we grading these buildings? You know, so we can grade them from how much energy you use, you know, from a traditional facility bricks and mortar assessment, you know, how old's the roof, the windows, the doors, etc. But if we're not, you know, that was really where we started to evolve the thinking of a building performance grading system, you know, and looking at thermal comfort, acoustic comfort, visual comfort, you know, again, the glare, daylighting, and that threshold with, you know, artificial lighting. And again, you know, we've spent many years chasing utility incentives and changing out, you know, LED lighting upgrades with no kind of real focus on circadian rhythm or impact on different themes in classrooms or anything like that. And yeah, trying to take a more holistic look to how buildings are performing. I think if there's a silver lining out of all of this, you know, we've been forced to step back and not only as we're designing, but how we're analyzing operational data, how we're ingesting operational data. It's more than just a retro commissioning project to save a bit of money, you know. And so I think that will evolve. I think how we, you know, I think the certification programs will evolve as well. You know, I think, you know, obviously we've got LEED, it's been around for many years. I mean, I'd still say it's the best formal process for documenting best practices, but at the end of the day, it's a series of checklists for a plaque in the wall for a, you know, kind of a performance period that was many years ago. It's not a reflection on how the building is working day to day. I mean, well, I've got a love-hate relationships with all these certifications because it's hard for me to bite the hand that feeds me a lot, but at the same time, it's you know, when you see the building folks hiring Lady Gaga and Robert De Niro to do an ad, you're like, well, we're probably paying way too much for those fees to begin with. Then it's just way too expensive. They've come out with the health and safety rating, which is a bit cheaper and more of an entry point, but then is that creating false expectations? You're not really putting any money into the building systems where you should be investing, and you're just investing in that plaque on the wall to tell people that it's okay, or the sticker on the front door. So I'm more excited about Reset. I'm kind of haven't dug into Wired Score's new smart building certification too, but from first pass, it looks like it's more focused on real pragmatic stuff. Like I said, I like Reset because it's a performance-based standard that's based on real data. Your data is good, you got certification. You got 3 months of non-compliant data, you lose the certification. So it's as simple as that.
Rory, I'd like to ask a question. In our May issue, we've kind of separated the building of the digital family and sort of the traditional control industry. And we're seeing the new wireless wave. In simple terms, maybe it's traditional versus the IoT industry falling on top of us. How are you seeing this data coming together to kind of be useful for the whole building? And are you seeing a separation? Are you seeing them combining, or what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think the data, using data in a more meaningful way has gone beyond the realm of just the chief engineer and their team, or the property manager and their team. Again, now you're starting to make real estate decisions on, well, we've held that lease for X amount of years and we're not getting the data from the building in the way that we like to ingest into our single pane of glass. Let's consider not renewing that lease, or should we build our own building versus leasing it, that kind of thing. So I think we're starting to see the data that we all deal with being used in different different realms, which is, I think, a positive thing.
Are you seeing that you have to take on the function of providing a platform to pull all that information together?
We consult on the strategy and the framework to put in place for that platform, but still, that single pane of glass is kind of, every MSI kind of has a different approach to that. Every company has a different approach to that, so it's like, I think we're almost getting to, I think that's another conversation down the line as well. What if I want to change out my single pane of glass, because we've been focusing on getting it to that point, and the data streams behind it, now in new construction with a blank sheet of paper, it's like, well, now what, how do we back this into an enterprise solution? Yeah, we've solved it for this one building, that was just this brand new building that we've built, but we've got 70 other locations across the globe. Now do we need to adopt this CMMS or this FDD tool, or this, this, what ultimately end up being the single pane of glass for that project? How do we back into the enterprise with that same solution? So
Rory, we're coming up to the top of the hour. I was reflecting on your comments on the leasing sign in Chicago that you're making. I was wondering whether at some point there'll be another bullet point on that sign that says data included.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good one.
But that's kind of the direction that we need to go, so the data is available for people that need to use it. So give you a chance to make some closing comments before we have to wrap up.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, again, thanks for having me. And yeah, just in closing, I'd say we need to focus on a people-centric approach to controlling our buildings, and again, designing and operating for the human experience is just going to be the name of the game. Like I said before, operational excellence is going to be defined by how the occupant experiences that space, and the threshold for those good or bad has lowered. So people have more access to data, and they're going to ask more questions. And I guess I feel most sorry for the chief engineers and the building operators, because now we're going to have a lot more than just a hot and cold call to field.
Okay, that's really a sort of a great place to wrap up on this first show about new market dynamics, and I think you've identified that. Be great for the rest of the month to figure out what this means to to this industry of smart buildings. So with that, let's wrap up. The video of this will be up tomorrow. And thank you, Rory, for joining us. And thanks for all of the attendees for being here and for the members to be part of this. So good luck to the Haystack Connect conference today, and also ControlCon. All of that will go well. And we'll see you next week to figure out what happened this week. So bye-bye all.
Awesome. Thanks
Hey,
a lot,
guys.
guys.
Bye.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rory.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.